Okay, this is session 21. All right, let's take a look at it. It's very interesting, actually, as all the sections are, really. So this is still chapter 3, section number 5. All right, chapter 3, just a reminder, the title of it is The Innocent Perception. And this is a section called Beyond Perception. Okay. So, Jesus says to Helen, and through Helen to the rest of us, I have said that the abilities you possess are only shadows of your real strength, and that perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation. No one has been sure of anything since. I have also made it clear that the resurrection was the means for the return to knowledge, which was accomplished by the union of my will with the Father's. We can now establish a distinction that will clarify some of our subsequent statements. So he says he's also made it clear that the resurrection is a return to knowledge, a means to return to knowledge. That abstract awareness in the original milieu, so to speak, in heaven, for use of terms that we're using here, okay? All right, to get back to that knowledge of what you are and where you fit in with everything, okay? He says the resurrection was a means for that. And the resurrection was accomplished by joining my will to my Father's. Right? In other words, just dissolving, so to speak. The ego dissolved, and you're right back into the awareness of your original state, right? When he refers to his Father's will, the Father's will is to extend this knowledge, to extend this love and abundance and bliss, right? That's the Father's will, right? And he'll get to that word creating again, all right? That's creations, that's our true creations. The extension of love, which encompasses all those other words, okay? So, he says, we can now establish a distinction that will clarify some of our subsequent statements. Since the separation, the belief in separation, the words create and make have become confused. When you make something, you do so out of a specific sense of lack or need. Anything made for a specific purpose has no true generalizability. When you make something to fill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation. The ego has invented many ingenious thought systems for this purpose. None of them is creative. Inventiveness is wasted effort, even in the most ingenious form. The highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. All right, so there's Jesus taking us down a few pegs, so to speak, okay? And he's saying no matter how ingenious your inventions are, or your thought, your thought systems, your theories, your fantastic mathematical theories, your economic theories, your social theories. He says, no matter how ingenious these things are, all right, he says wasted effort, right? He's not condemning us, not judging us for it. He's just saying as he'll say later on in the text, why wait for heaven? Right? But he's saying all these things, right? All of your abilities, they're shadows of your real strength. Right? The highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. Right? And that's you, God's creation. Right? That's the mind. Right? It's not the shell. Right? It's the mind. Our minds, the one mind, we always perceive it as separate minds, because that's what the ego does. It fosters separation, the belief in separation, all these individuals. Right? That's why he says that he uses the word specific. Right? When you make something, you do so out of a specific sense of lack or need. We have to get across that river. That's a specific need. Right? So we either have a ferry or build a bridge or swim. Okay? So those are, out of specific needs. I'm hungry. I have to go get some food. Through the ages, there's been a lot of inventive answers for that problem, okay? But those are specific needs, sense of lack, okay? All right, and he says, none of them is creative, all right? They're very ingenious, very inventive, all right? But none of them is creative, because the creation is the extension of love, right? Which incorporates all those concepts: abundance, generosity, kindness, compassion, all those things, invulnerability, right? Those are all the creations that are just continually extended, right? And he'll tell us over and over again, no matter what you think you're doing, in actuality, you are at home in God, in the mind of God, creating. Okay. So, and this is the highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. None of this stuff compares, right, to the awareness of being one with God, one with everything. All right. So paragraph 3. Knowing, as we have already observed, does not lead to doing. The confusion between your real creation and what you have made of yourself is so profound that it has become literally impossible for you to know anything. Knowledge is always stable, and it is quite evident that you are not. Nevertheless, you are perfectly stable as God created you. In this sense, when your behavior is unstable, you are disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. You could do this if you choose, but you would hardly want to do it if you were in your right mind. Right? So, once again, there's that theme, that idea, that the mind, that thought, oh, maybe I could be separate from oneness. The mind splits into the wrong mind and the right mind. Then we have to decide, which one am I going to align myself with? Which one will I believe? Okay? So, and he says, once again, he says, it just makes us, knowledge is always stable, right? And it is quite evident that you are not, right? It's not saying that to make us feel bad, to put us down. It's just, in a kind of like a Mr. Spock sense, just stating it logically, Captain, your behavior is unstable. It's proof that you're not stable, right? And knowledge, is stable. It's always the same. All right? The knowledge of our source, the knowledge of the milieu in which we truly exist is always the same. It's the oneness. It's the continuous extension of love. Okay? But in our condition, since we're in our wrong mind, we've decided to believe in separation, and then the proverbial Big Bang happens and we jump out of the mind so we don't get caught, okay? Because all of a sudden we're projecting our own feelings of guilt onto our source, and we say, God is coming to get us. He's stomping his way through the garden right now, right? He's going to kick us out. Right? He's going to get us, right? And that's the idea. And we come to this this situation in which we find ourselves with the idea that I did something wrong, there's something missing now. I did something wrong, and there's something out there that's going to get me, right? And we can think of numerous things that are going to get us, believe me. Right? That's why we have insurance, okay? But that's just another invention, okay? All right? Stop me before I joke again. So knowledge is always stable, and it is quite evident that you are not. All right? Nevertheless, you are perfectly stable as God created you. And you're still in that state, dreaming of exile, as they say. Dreaming that we're here. All right? And we're going to work our way back. Right? As Dr. Wapnick would say, nobody goes poof. Right? Nobody disappears and goes back into heaven. Right? It's a process. Right? So, he says, when your behavior is unstable, when you're in the wrong mind, when we're in the ego thought system, all right, you are disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. All right? You're saying, no, that's not who I am. I'm not filled with everything. All right? I'm not here to extend everything. That's God's idea of me and you. All right? And all of us as one. All right? So he says, so when you're unstable, you're disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. And he says, you could do this if you want. You could do this if you choose. All right? He says, but you wouldn't want to. He says you would hardly want to do it if you were in your right mind. And that's incentive for however you want to do it, to come back to the quiet center, so to speak. All right? Come back to the right mind, where the memory of your true existence resides. It's still there. It came with us into this nuttiness. Right? It came with us into this life experience. Right? The memory of who we are, and it resides in the right mind. Right? And there are many, many teachers, legitimate spiritual teachers throughout the ages, who were trying to tell us how to get back there. Okay? And there still are teachers who try to tell us how to get back there because they have experienced it. And they're here to help us along the way. All right? And Jesus was one of those teachers. All right? And he even says in the beginning of this book, this is not the only way home. All right? It's one of 1,000 paths. All right? He'll use that number 1,000 a couple of times. It's like the Chinese, they use the word 10,000, just to mean a lot of things, 10,000 things. All right? It's a lot. All right? But there are many teachers, And the whole idea is to come into your right mind. It's a term we use in the Course in Miracles. Right? And it's a matter of looking at your wrong mind, looking at the thoughts that are going on in the wrong mind, the ego thought system, and not judging them. Saying, oh, look, that's my ego guiding me. Right? I mean, you can quickly assess the situation, say, am I, really happy with this? Am I satisfied with this? Do I want this to continue? Or do I want to have my perception changed? Right? Do I want to see this through the eyes of who I really am? Right? Do I want to see this through the eyes of peace? Right? If that's the case, I go to, and just say, go to my higher self, if you want to use that expression. In the Course, we'll use the term Holy Spirit, Jesus. Right? They'll say about Jesus, Jesus is the goal we seek. And he's not only the goal we seek, but he's the means of achieving that goal. Right? So you get it? All right. So you go to your right mind. He says, and when you're there, he said, you'd hardly want to run around like a nut anymore. You'd hardly want to be unstable. You'd hardly want to disagree with what you find in your right mind. You'd hardly want to disagree with God's idea of you, who you are. All right. So, as they say, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? All right. Practice, practice, practice. And that's what we do. That's what the idea is. Practice, practice, practice. And that's the idea of noticing when you're running around in the ego and responding to everything in the ego fashion, all right, which is getting all these solutions for perceived problems, right? And then one problem leads to another. All right. I was just reading a statement this morning. When illusions combine with illusions, there's war. Right? So there's chaos and conflict. Right? So we're bouncing off everything in the ego thought system. But the idea is to catch yourself as soon as you can and come back to that calm, stately calm within. Right? And sit in the peace and let the answers arise, because we still believe we're here. And we're getting lifted out little by little. Right? So we see specific situations through the eyes of peace. We see them differently now. And I don't respond with the anger, resentment, and fear and chaos. Right? I respond with the appropriate form of peace. Right? Compassion, kindness, all those things. Okay. He says, but you'd hardly want to do this if you were in your right mind. All right? You'd hardly want to disagree with God if you were in your right mind. Paragraph 4. The fundamental question you continually ask yourself cannot properly be directed to the ego at all. All right? And I had ego written in, but the word is yourself. The fundamental question you continually ask yourself cannot probably be directed to yourself at all. You keep asking what it is that you are. This implies that the answer is not only one you know, but it is also one that is up to you to supply. You cannot perceive yourself correctly. You have no image to be perceived. The word image is always perception related and not a part of knowledge. Images are symbolic and stand for something else. The idea of changing your image recognizes the power of perception, but also implies that there is nothing stable to know. My image can always change, right? I mean, there's entire industries devoted to imaging, Right now, these days they call it branding, right? My brand, I gotta protect my brand, right? All right, no jokes. All right, but he says that's proof that you're not stable. You always have to change your perception, change people's perceptions of yourself. Right? So he says that's a sign of instability, not knowledge, which is stable. All right? And I don't want to skip over this, but it is a big question. All legitimate spiritual teachers would get to that point. We're asking that question, who am I? Right. We could even use a different pronoun, what am I? Right. Either way, start with the who, it's easier. Who am I? Krishnamurti came down to that question. He told students that, right? Gangaji was a wonderfully soft-spoken teacher. She has a book called You Are That. You Are That. Right? And once you touch on the memory of who you are, you understand what that sentence means. You are that. Right? And I believe there's like a ritual in the East for swamis. Right? And somebody, if anybody knows, remember, I can always be corrected. Right? I used to tell some of my classes, just feel free to question me, because sometimes I have no idea where I get this information from. But this ritual is called, as they're coming into their official Swami persona, the ritual is neti neti, not this, not that. Right? Where they walk through their lives looking at, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm not that. It's a very interesting exercise, right? But I'm just trying to make the point that it goes through legitimate spiritual practices, right? To come down to that question, who am I? Who am I? Right? Even Eckhart Tolle was, and the night that he was having such angst, such horrible anxiety and depression, that he said, I don't have the exact words, but I think it was this, I can't live like this anymore. Right? And then a question popped up in his mind, who's the I that can't live like this anymore? And it started his awakening. It spurred it. And he had this transformation where as he would describe it succinctly, his ego died, right? That I, who was his ego, right? It dissolved, right? And he's had this inspirational life ever since, right? He's here guiding people, telling them to come into that stately calm, right? Just a different teacher, different words, right? Not exactly the same as the Course in Miracles. You know, I always had a tendency to confuse myself. You study this, study that, you know. And I come back to the Course. It's like my comfortable clothes, my comfortable shoes. Okay then, enough about me. So the fundamental question you continually ask yourself cannot be properly directed to your ego self. Right? It has to be directed to your right mind, your higher self. Please show me who I am. and allow that awareness to arise. You don't have to figure it out. Just be willing to let it arise. That's the key to a lot of things. Just let it arise. Don't figure it out. Okay? Paragraph 5 on page 45. Knowing is not open to interpretation. All right? Remember, it's stable. You may try to interpret meaning, but this is always open to error because it refers to the perception of meaning. Such incongruities are the results of attempts to regard yourself as separated and unseparated at the same time. It is impossible to make so fundamental a confusion without increasing your overall confusion still further. Your mind may have become very ingenious, but as always happens when method and content are separated, it is utilized in a futile attempt to escape from an inescapable impasse. Ingenuity is totally divorced from knowledge, because knowledge does not require ingenuity. Ingenious thinking is not the truth. It's not the truth that shall set you free, but you are free of the need to engage in it when you are willing to let it go. Right? So when you're willing to let all your ingenious thinking go by the wayside, right? When you're willing to relinquish, one of my favorite words, that ingenious thinking, all right? This is knowledge will rise up. So, like you said in the beginning, knowing it's not open to interpretation. It's not open to your perception. Right? It's stable. Right? And ingenious thinking is not the truth. Just go ahead and engage in it, but realize that you're not going to work your way up into true knowledge, the knowledge of who you are, what your existence is all about. Or as Jesus said previously, joining your will with the Father's will. Right? That's true knowledge. That's the resurrection. Right? That's the rising up of the awareness. Right? That is the resurrection. When the awareness of who you truly are rises up. That's why Jesus says in this book, "You were with me when I arose." Meaning that the resurrection happens in the mind, right? The awareness, and all minds are connected, right? Even though in our way of seeing things, everything is separate. Okay? So, paragraph 6. Prayer is a way of asking for something. It is the medium of miracles. But the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, because those who have been forgiven have everything. Once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes utterly meaningless. The prayer for forgiveness is nothing more than a request that you may be able to recognize what you already have. In electing perception instead of knowledge, you placed yourself in a position where you could resemble your Father only by perceiving miraculously. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. Creation is your source and your only real function. Right? I mean, he puts it down to it's that simple. And remember the symphonic nature of the Course. These themes, like notes and phrases of music, will be repeated over and over again in different ways. Right? So he's saying that creation is your source, all right? The extension of all that is the source, right? And it's your only real function. It's the only thing that you do, so to speak, is you extend. And the mind does that. Right? It's the extension of love. Right? That term that encompasses so many other words. Right? And let's just go back to it. He says, well, prayer is a way of asking for something. Right? It's a supplication. It is the medium of miracles. It is the medium of miracles, right? But the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness. And remember, the Course's idea of forgiveness is the idea of your original purity, your original innocence. You never did anything. You never separated. It's the dissolving of that thought. The thought that, oh, I separated from oneness. Oh, man, something's going to get, God's going to get me now. Then you run around your life. It's not me, it's you, it's him, it's them. All right? And the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, to ask for the memory of my innocence. And to allow it to be for everyone else also. Right? You can't have your own innocence all by yourself. It's not like a Halloween candy or something. You know? You have to hide it. Nobody else can have it. All right? It's for everyone. And if it's not for everyone, you know, you're not having it. There's a flaw in your plan. There's that tragic flaw. It has to be, everyone is allowed to be innocent. In reality, in their original form, all right? I mean, granted, there are some extremely nutty people running around in this earth. I don't know about aliens, but there's some nutty human beings running around, that's for sure. And some dangerous people. And in the ego's thought system, there are guilty and not guilty, okay? You know, somebody runs around killing people, you can't just say, okay, well, he just doesn't know who he is. You know, there's a good chance he has to be removed from society. So we have laws and things like that. And this is what we try to do. We try to walk through this world and ask, how do I see this through the eyes of love? Right? And it's, you know, it can be a very loving thing to remove somebody from society so that he doesn't wreak havoc on, you know, untold numbers of people. Right? So let's not get too caught up. You know, remember, we still believe we're here. You know, I always like to say, you still need traffic lights. Really. Otherwise, there'd be chaos. Right? But the only meaningful prayer is for the knowledge of who you truly are. That's forgiveness. The knowledge that you're not guilty. Because if I have that awareness, I can walk through this ego world, and I can be compassionate and kind and make the right decisions. You know, you're here, you're going to have to make decisions. You know, but you can be making those decisions from the foundation of forgiveness, of innocence. You know, you can see right through the actions of people, right to their original innocence, and still realize that, you know, for their good and for everybody else's good, you know, we have to remove them, you know, put them someplace and hope they learn Okay then. So the only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness. Because those who have been forgiven have everything. Those who have the awareness of their innocence have everything. Right? All right, the prayer for forgiveness is nothing more than a request that you be able to recognize what you already have. You are at home in God, dreaming of exile. All right? Your other life continues, as he says. Okay, paragraph 7. The statement, God created man in his own image and likeness, needs reinterpretation. Image, all right, so God created man in his own image, can be understood as thought. Right? And likeness means, it can be changed to of like quality. So God extended his thought, and it was the same quality as himself. Right? Sorry for using the masculine, but that's the way the Course does it. Okay? So the source extended, and you were just like it. Right? And that's who you are. All right? And that's what we're working toward. Who am I? The only meaningful prayer. Okay. So image can be understood as thought and likeness as of like quality. God did create spirit in his own thought and of a quality like to his own. There is nothing else. Let that sink. There is nothing else. There is the thought that is just like God, and that's you, and there is nothing else. Perception, on the other hand, is impossible without a belief in more and less. Right? Perception is impossible without the belief in more and less. At every level, it involves selectivity. Perception is a continual process of accepting and rejecting, organizing and reorganizing, shifting and changing. Evaluation is an essential part of perception because judgments are necessary in order to select. Right? So when we choose to believe we're separated, we automatically get involved in judgments and selectivity and putting things in order. Oh, this is bigger, this is smaller, this is dangerous, this is not. You know, judgments all day long. That's perception. Right? And the thing is, don't judge yourself for doing that. All right? Just notice, oh, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And don't judge yourself. Just ask for that perception to be corrected. All right? Help me to see and interpret the situations through the eyes of peace, through the eyes of my own innocence. Okay? So, paragraph 8. What happens to perceptions if there are no judgments and nothing but perfect equality? What happens to perceptions if there's only perfect equality? There's no differentiations. There's no up and down, back, forward, left, right, big, small. Right? Perception then becomes impossible. All right? When everything just evens out, perception becomes impossible. Truth can only be known. All of it is equally true. And knowing any part of it is to know all of it. Only perception involves partial awareness. Knowledge transcends the laws governing perception, because partial knowledge is impossible. It is all one and has no separate parts. You who are really one with it need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. Right? Now he's going back to that statement. And he says, the fundamental question you continually ask yourself, all right, cannot be directed to your ego self, all right, because you keep asking what it is you are, right? So he says, once you know that, all right, you know everything, right? It is all one and has no separate parts. You who are really one with it, with knowledge, right, need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. Right? So he's wrapping it, bringing it all up into a nice summation here. Right? When I sincerely desire to know who I am, and I'm in my right mind, and that awareness arises, he says, now you know. Now you know everything. You know all there is to know. Okay? You know who you are, what you are, where you fit in, what your creations are, what your function is, I should say. Right? So, knowledge. All right? He says, you who are really one with it, knowledge, need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. Right? To know God's miracle is to know Him. Right? You are the miracle. You are the extension of God. Right? To let that rise up in your mind is to know God. Right? Forgiveness, paragraph 9, forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. All right? There's the very, very good definition of forgiveness. Right? It's not, oh, I see you did something wrong, but I'm going to let it slide. All right? And believe me, after this text was written, and it was promulgated to some extent, people were already getting the idea of forgiveness wrong. So Helen sat down, and Jesus, in the same manner, came through Helen, and she took down, he dictated a little pamphlet, right? And one of the things that pamphlet did was really clarify the idea of forgiveness, right? But we'll get to that, hopefully. So just look at paragraph 9, the beginning. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Help me to see correctly. Help me to see through the eyes of oneness, not the eyes of separation. Help me to see it correctly. That is forgiveness. Right. Correct perception of your brother is necessary because minds have chosen to see themselves as separate. So correct perception of the other is necessary, right? To realize that we're not separate. The minds are not separate. Right? Spirit knows God completely. Right? That is its miraculous power. The fact that each has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking. The world believes that if anyone has everything, there is nothing left. But God's miracles are as total as His thoughts, because they are His thoughts. All right? So the fact that each one has the power completely, right? And that is to know God. You have the power to know God. And that power is complete in you. And in that knowledge, you become complete. Right? And the world believes that if anyone has everything, which is that awareness that you have everything, that there's nothing left. Right? There's nothing left for me. You have it all. What's up with that? That's the way the world thinks, okay? And in the world of form, there are people that have more and other people have less. It's just, in form, that's the fact. But in reality, in our true existence, everyone has everything. Everything has all they need, right? The only thing we really need is the awareness that everyone is part of one mind that extended. And it extended, and it was like itself. All right? Jesus said, I and the Father are one. Right? In the New Testament. All right? That's one of the reasons why they had to get rid of him. What is he talking about? All right? That's crazy talk. It's blasphemy. All right? But that's the truth. And here he says, the resurrection was when I joined my will with my Father. Because momentarily, he had a look at the ego, the thought of separation, and said, I don't think so. And he joined his will with the Father. Right? And that played out in our dream of history. Okay? So, God's miracles are as total as his thoughts. You are as total as God's thoughts, right? Because you are his thoughts. Right? And remember, he's going to say later on, thoughts do not leave the mind that thinks of them. So we're still in the mind of God, dreaming that we're here, right? And other ancient spiritual paths have used that metaphor of dreaming, right? I know I mentioned earlier that Buddha, right, woke up. He was the awakened one. So, paragraph 10. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. Right? Since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Perception is based on a separated state, so that anyone who perceives at all needs healing. Communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. God and his miracle are inseparable. How beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God who live in his light. Your worth is beyond perception because it is beyond doubt. Do not perceive yourself in different lights. Know yourself in the one light where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. Okay. Jesus ends with a little uplifting note after telling us that our ingenuity is basically meaningless. He says, once you find out who you really are, you just bask in that light, right? And it's a state of communion, right? The two, basically Latin roots to have a union with, right? That's communion, right? To be with, right? To unite with. That's your natural state, united with your source. Right? Not prayer. Prayer is not your natural state. Prayer is asking for something, which implies a need for something. which implies a belief in separation, a belief in lack. All right. But he says, as long as perception lasts, prayer is a place, right? Since perception rests on lack. Right? Those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and give themselves over to truth. Right? Once again, the atonement, just another synonym for the idea that you never left, you never separated. Right? You're still as innocent and pure as the moment you were created. Right? That's the atonement. He always says to accept that. Accept the atonement for yourself. Accept that awareness. Right? Which is basically what Jesus said when I joined my will with my Father. Right? He accepted the fact that he wasn't separated. Right? And he was able to bring that message into our experience here. All right. Okay. I think we'll leave it there. All right. Until we meet again, we'll try to take Jesus' directive and know yourself in the one light where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. All right? And that's who you are. And we're all happy for that. Thank you.